Hello and welcome to the Rambler Podcast. My name is Jimmy Smith and I am your host. I am the Assistant Vice President of Development and Strategic Initiatives here at Cathedral Prep. And before we get started into today's episode of the podcast, I just want to share with you that on June 1st, we announced the Fun for Excellence 30-Day Challenge, Igniting Excellence. Through this month of June, we challenge alumni from each class to make their gift to the Fun for Excellence. The 5 classes with the highest percentage of giving through the 2022-2023 fiscal year will be displayed in the Salata Technology Innovation Center Student Life Center for the entire 2023-2024 school year. A sneak peek of class participation was sent to you in a proof of the advancement review last month, and now there's less than 30 days left this fiscal year to move your class into the top 5. So, I just want to say we call you all to ignite excellence and rise to the challenge. We want to know which class has the most pride, which class wants to give back the most, which class wants to make the biggest impact. So please, we ask if you join us in giving back during this month of June and help us continue in our traditions of excellence by going to www.cathedralprep.com/give to make your contribution. Now, let's go ahead and get started in today's episode of the podcast featuring Mr. John Zack. Hi everyone, my name is Jimmy Smith and welcome to episode number 24 of the Rambler Podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. On this episode of the podcast, we are very excited to have John Zack on as a guest. John is a member of the Cathedral Prep class of 1982. After graduating from Prep, John went on to attend Clarion University, where he received an undergraduate degree in Business Computer Information Systems in 1986. He then started his career at Ernst & Young, where he worked in the healthcare consulting practice from 1986 to 1990. After that, he went on to own and operate A. Anthony & Sons Concrete from 1990 to 2009. He then went on to acquire Polacco's Chocolates with another Cathedral Prep graduate, Joe Hilbert, from 2009 to 2015, when they then sold it. He then began working as a project management consultant from 2015 to 2019, in healthcare and the construction field. Nowadays, he is working with CT Consultants as a regional manager, and most notably, was heavily involved with us in the construction project for Cathedral Prep with the addition of the Salata Center. So, John, we're happy to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and fun little backstory about me and you. When I left for that short period between my first stint at Prep and where I'm at now, I met you my first week working for Molino Homes.
Yep.
Yeah. I worked with, shout out to Dominic Molino and Natalie Washburn over there, and the great work they're doing. But that was funny. I remember coming now to Prep for my second stint. I'm like, hey, I know you.
So we continue to educate you when it comes to construction.
Yes, because for people who don't know, I took that job to work for Molino Homes with no construction background. Yep. Dom was willing to hire me just based on my sales and management background. Like, I'll teach you the construction side of things.
That's the easy side.
Yeah, right. And then I had great people like yourself kind of tutoring me along the way to learn what
Always
I need
glad
to know.
to help.
Yeah. So I'm glad to have you on these side of things now for the prep side of it. And, as we kind of roll into the podcast here, can you tell me a little bit about, your time at Prep as a student? What made you decide to attend the school, and what were some of your favorite memories as a student?
I attended St. George Grade School, and the natural progression was to attend a Catholic high school. So I picked Prep because my father graduated from there, as well as most of my friends were planning on attending Prep.
Gotcha.
My best memories of Prep are both academic and athletic. Academically, my time spent with Miss Maxwell, then became Mrs. Mullen, provided a priceless as I furthered my academic studies. She was by far the best teacher I had across all grade levels, including graduate school. Athletically, I was fortunate to participate in multiple sports, which added to the number of friends I have today. Sports taught me the value of learning how to collaborate with teammates to achieve a common goal.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's great, when you start to reflect on those times. I know we talk about the Prep brotherhood, right? And those bonds that are formed during your time through studies, athletics. And people often ask, what's your favorite memory, Jimmy? And I say, it's the day-to-day, just being with your friends.
Right. One of the other peak memories was in 1980, of course, we went on to win the state championship in basketball.
Right.
So you had, guys like Andy Cecchini, Tim Gore, and a host of others. And I believe that was the first time that we were able to achieve that.
That probably was a really cool experience.
Well, it was bus trip after bus trip, and we would be riding down the road, and unbeknownst to most of the advisors, we were rolling dice in the back and having all kinds of fun.
Right, exactly. That's good stuff. The prep sixth man, right?
Yes,
rolling in.
exactly.
Exactly. Yep. That's cool. So talk to us about your involvement with the school now. You came on to work with us with the Salata project. Can you talk to us about how you got involved with that and what your role was?
Sure. I became involved because I received a phone call from John Hilbert, another classmate of mine, and is a very, very involved in the Cathedral Prep family. And he asked if my skill sets lent themselves to helping Prep through their construction project. Prep at the time had some change in leadership, and they were kind of floundering and wondering, well, how do we complete this project in such a short time frame? So he asked. I said, absolutely. I was interviewed by John and Sarah and
Sarah
Dave,
Callner. Yep.
Sarah
Dave
Callner
Slomsky.
and
Yep.
Dave Slomsky, and they molded over for about 10 minutes and said, okay, you're hired. So
easy meeting, huh?
Yep. So my role was to become the owner's rep for the project. It wasn't specifically for Prep themselves being the owner, but it's for the project. So I became an advocate not only for Prep, but for the architect, the engineer, the construction folks, just to make sure that the project was delivered on time and as close to budget as possible. Because we weren't involved early on in the planning process, it was difficult to bring it in on budget when we weren't responsible for the budget.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. My little knowledge of construction from my time with Molino.
Right.
A lot of deadlines, a lot of budget items, a lot of moving parts, especially with COVID. All the supply chain issues, pricing.
Correct.
A lot of things you're juggling there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So now, who were some of the main people that you worked with at Prep on the project? What were their roles, and how was that interaction with you in the school?
Sure. Well, from the Prep staff perspective, Mike Mishler, the director of facilities, he and I spent every single day together for probably the last 2 years. Joanne Rogers, the director of finance, we kept in close contact as far as approving or not approving change orders and just keeping abreast of the finances of where we were within the budget. Dave Slomsky, the interim president, of course, he had the task of signing all of the change orders and me explaining them to him of why you're signing this.
Right.
And then Will Patouche, he was very instrumental from a educational programming standpoint, because we can build the structure, but if the programming isn't right inside, it's not going to make any sense going forward.
Yeah. And I would say having somebody like you on board to help explain those change orders, for example, to the school, because, no offense to anybody on the school, they're not necessarily the construction experts, right?
Correct.
Like you are. So you can kind of take that, relay it to us, talk about how it's going to impact us with the building, budget, the school operations, and whatnot. So it's great to hear the collaboration that was involved with the whole process.
It definitely took a village. Yes. And then from the board of directors standpoint, I would routinely give a report to John Hilbert, Sarah Callner, Jim Walzak. They were kind of the three that became the little building committee from a board level.
Gotcha.
Frontier General Contracting, of course, you had Rob Doyle Jr. He was the owner and he was the project manager. Jake Schultz, he was the superintendent of the Salata large build and the main school renovations. And then Bob Hortzman for Frontier as well. He was the superintendent for the dance, fitness, and locker room renovations.
Gotcha. Cool.
So we had multiple projects going on. In addition to those projects, we had the roof replacement, the slate roof replacement. We were dealing with Alex Roofing.
Yeah.
We were replacing the turfed field at the event center.
Right. That did happen.
And then anything else that got thrown our way, we just it was like a grab bag of everything, was just a big melting pot of it. It had facilities attached to it. Mike Mishler and I ended up having it under our umbrella.
So how do you manage all that, right? So, there's all these moving parts, and it's not just as simple as you got 5 projects you're working on or whatever. There's a lot of little details involved without that. How do you manage that?
Well, you just have to be highly organized, and you have to have processes in place to manage, daily, weekly, monthly, And it's just going back to those tools to make sure that everything is being managed properly. And some days it takes everything I have to manage me, let alone the projects. But other people that we, heavily involved with, Rothmar's Architects. They were the main architect on the job. JW Architecture, Jason Wazorek, he was the architect for the Dance Fitness Locker Room. And then you had your host of other subconsultants and vendors. The MEP engineer, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, that was CJL. Civil engineer with John Laird and Associates. Acoustical engineer, that was NV5. They were actually out of Chicago. We had the audio visual vendors, Grisey, to help us, with that part of it. And then you had your fixtures, furniture, and equipment vendors, everything that if you were to turn the building upside down, that would fall down, that wasn't affixed to the structure.
Gotcha.
Where it's tables and anything to populate the classrooms and things of that nature. And Will was highly instrumental in helping guide us through what we needed to actually give these students the ability to learn properly.
Right, makes sense. Yeah. You look at the place now and, the finished work, but I remember, so I came back on in December 2021 and, we had the wall still boarded up so kids could walk through the hall, but couldn't walk on the addition part of it. And you just see how quickly things started to happen as these projects progressed and all the things started to come together. I mean, it was a rush, but we got it to the end of the finish line to start the school year. What would you say, like, as you started to become involved, saw the project through, and, I know there's probably still a punch list even you guys are working through.
Yeah, we're about 95, 96% complete with the punch list, but we still have lingering items out there.
Awesome. So what were some of the greatest obstacles that between you and people at Prep faced to complete this project on time?
Well, anytime you touch a building that's 100 plus years old, it's a challenge. So, the biggest obstacles were changes stemming from design oversight, mainly related to attaching to the existing building. You had structural unknowns, you had wall thickness discrepancies, we had unforeseen circumstances due to the age, like I said, of the building and lack of good as-built drawings. And as-built drawing is, you start with your architectural construction drawings, but then changes happen constantly in the field. And people are supposed to be documenting what that change is. So by the time you're done, you have all these red-lined construction drawings that then somebody takes and then compiles the as-built. So when we do 10 years from now, if we have a question, we should be able to go to that drawing and actually get an answer.
Right.
Well, we had very little to no drawings of, they were some of them from the 1940s.
Right.
And it was a different era back then. Nothing was digital. There wasn't a digital age. Everything was just paper. And so that was very challenging. But some of those unforeseen circumstances, we started digging and we got into unsuitable soil to support the foundation. So we had to excavate that out, bring in, off-site soil. Having to reroute plumbing lines once we opened up ceilings that we never knew that there were actually other lines in there. So things that you really couldn't see. And then some of the changes were owner scope changes, such as additional access controls. We had data and low voltage revisions, light fixture upgrades, things that as the project was progressing, the owner is saying, well, I'd like to do this and I'd like to do that. Well, that comes with a time cost and actually a monetary cost. So then we'd have to go back and make sure that A, we could get the materials in a timely fashion, and B, I'd have to knock on Joanne's door and say, hey, do we have the money to make this upgrade?
Right.
So it's that constant give and take.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. Ever changing, ever moving. Like you said, things you can't predict are the things that are the hardest to plan for.
We had 40 to 50, change orders that were written on this project. Yeah. We like to typically have, 10 or less, but it just like when they redid the Warner Theater, that was, they every time they turned around, they opened up something old, they found something new, a new problem. So it wasn't the fault of anybody in particular. You just can't foresee things like that. But we were running on a very short time frame because school needed to open. That next year. Right. And so we couldn't just say, hey, we're going to be 4 months behind. That Villa had been, they already found a new tenant for Villa at that point in time, being the community college.
Yep.
So we couldn't stay at Villa, and we couldn't just stay at Prep. So we had to make it happen, and took an army to make that happen.
Well, and even, like I mentioned, you walk through the building now, those things you're talking about, you don't necessarily think of when you walk in. It's like, wow, this is great. It's so amazing. You don't think about all those little things that it took to make that happen to be what it is today.
Exactly.
So when you walk in there now, what are the things that you're most proud of? Main features that are there, things that you look at?
Well, one thing that stands out and that people can actually feel is the HVAC system. Prep, since its inception, never had air conditioning.
Right.
And now we have air conditioning. If you would have been in the building, 2.5 years ago, even in the winter, there were hot spots in the building, there were cold spots in the building. Now it's very constant from a heating and then an air conditioning perspective. For the first time, we have vertical transportation. We have an elevator.
Right.
So now if somebody, unfortunately, is injured or if somebody's sick and they have to be transported up or down, now we have an elevator, to be able to do that.
When I was a freshman, one of the seniors sold me an elevator pass, but I could never find it.
Well, now you can find it.
Now I can find it.
Exactly. We have a science, technology, engineering, and art and math labs now. We never had, an engineering lab. We never had actual construction equipment, saws.
Right.
And we have 3D printers now, things that we've never been exposed to. The dance, fitness, and locker room updates. We never had a dance studio, never had a need for a dance studio. Merged with Villa, we created a dance studio.
Yeah.
We have a fitness center. As you know, you got to take care of your physical being as well as your mental being.
That's right.
So that's going to help with that. And then the locker rooms were still as old as when I left in 1982. Of course, technology upgrades. Working with Jesse and Andy. And just making sure that we have a complete wireless campus now. And what we're able to do there. And then the student commons is another great. The Hilbert Commons is another great. It's more like a hub in a university, a college university, that, that feel and that collaboration space.
Yeah, if there's any alums or friends that want to come get a tour of it, email me, jimmy.smith@cathedralprep.com, because it is cool. You walk into this new Hilbert Commons area and you see the new area,
right.
But even you're talking about, the old pool, it's filled in, it's gone.
It's gone.
That's where the fitness center is now.
Right.
That's where the dance studio is. So it's really cool to see these old spaces. And then the tunnel that used to be there, that's gone as well.
Right.
The fitness center connects to the gym. So it's really neat to see as this is all played out, the ways that the existing building was remodeled and renovated, and then the addition was put on, and all in synergy to come together to make the building what it is today.
Exactly.
Appreciate you hitting on all that stuff, and I'm going to transition a little bit now with you to start talking a little bit about, pick your brain about some of the experiences you've had with business. You got a very impressive resume, a lot of great things you've done in your career, and opportunity for us to be able to learn from you. Early on when you started to pursue owning your own business and operating in your career, what were some of the lessons that you learned early on as a business owner that stuck with you through the years?
Sure. Well, one thing that stands out to this day, and I think it always will, communication is the key to success. And it has two parts, talking and listening. And listening by far is the most important part of communication. Too many times you're in a meeting and, you're in a meeting of 8 people and somebody's talking and you see people, all they want to do, their mouths are starting to move and their hands are starting to go up. They're not listening to what the person is saying. They're wanting to get their point across.
Yeah.
And, it takes both sides to be able to be a good communicator.
Right.
And I think if we could just tell ourselves to slow down, to listen before we speak, digest what somebody is saying, we'd be much further along.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, that makes sense. You strike me as a guy that's a no-nonsense kind of guy. Anytime I've interacted with you, it's like, all right, chop, chop, let's go. And, jokingly.
I always ask you, did you bring in any money today?
Right, exactly. You bring in any money? That's the number one question. Come on, get right to the point, Jimmy. What are you doing today? So when it comes to project management, you talked about being detail-oriented already, but what advice do you have for people who might be in the career of pursuing project management and how to be the most productive in that field?
From a project management standpoint, you need to manage 3 key documents. And this is mainly for, a construction project. So,
Got it.
You have your scope. So if your scope isn't defined properly up front, it's going to lead to issues. The scope on this project in particular kept morphing over time because we had different leadership from time to time. We had somebody that was running with it, doing a good job. That stopped. Then we had somebody try to pick it up and run with it a little further. Then that ceased. So if we have continuity and to define a fluid scope, that's step one. That leads to schedule. So now we're going to take this scope of work that needs to be done. We're going to say it needs to be done in what time frame. So if the scope starts to change while we're in the process, then that time frame starts to slide. Typically it gets larger. Well, like I told you earlier, we didn't have any more time.
Yeah.
Actually, they were asking us, well, we need to have this done in less time because we need to populate it with, fixtures, the furniture, the equipment.
Right.
So we kept being really stressed about that. And then budget. So if you have scope creep, then of course your budget is going to continue to increase. If the scope wasn't defined, if you didn't do your due diligence up front, then you're going to run into those change order after change order after change order. So really the balance is to keep that scope, schedule, and budget in line with one another, and your project will be successful.
Right. Yeah, those are three very key things that I could imagine. Could be fluid, moving, but
Yes.
as long as you have these as your baseline, keep them aligned, it creates
Exactly.
the success you're looking for.
Correct.
So we've already mentioned you've owned and operated several different businesses. What metrics do you use to measure success?
You have a couple things. Company financials, of course, but more importantly, staff growth. Metrics in general are used to run a company, but leading people and watching them grow is the best measure of success. I've often said there's a lot of people there, again, that can run a facility based on numbers, but leading people there's even fewer people that are able to do that.
Right.
And it's when you find those good leaders to lead those individuals, to help them realize their fullest potential, then that those people can then carry on to then step up and become future leaders themselves.
Any advice for people who are aspiring leaders?
Well, just take time to listen, take time to learn. Don't rush, and just try to absorb as much as you can. Look at the good, look at the bad, try to focus on that good, and try to eliminate anything that doesn't seem to make sense.
And I would even say, listening to you just for the short time already with the project management side of things, if you're an aspiring leader, take what John's talking about here and really break that down further. Don't just take his words here on this podcast episode and just, okay, cool, that was a nice episode. Sit down and write some notes on what John's talking about. When he's talking about the scope of work, the schedule, and the budget, and what that means maybe for your particular job and what you're doing. If you're really looking to build success and create a successful career, these are the things you need to do to make it happen, to be a leader, as John's talking about. So through your successes and experiences in your career, how have you learned to best manage your time? I mean, oh my goodness, much hats that you're balancing.
Well, like we talked about earlier, developing daily, weekly, and monthly agendas to be completed. They change often, but if it's written down, then you can easily, if it's not written down, you can easily spin your wheels and you can spiral out of control and you end up wasting a lot of time. When I was with Anthony's Concrete, A. Anthony and Sons, we would try to group jobs to realize the best potential for the day. So we wouldn't travel from Northeast to Girard, to try to do work. We would try to stay in Northeast or stay in Girard. And it's just trying to organize yourself that you can eke out, every single minute of that day to the best of everybody's ability.
So proper planning.
Leads
to the success that.
Correct.
Yes, to be the most productive with your days and your time.
Yes.
To produce the best results, right?
Right.
Through your career, I'm sure there's been great ups, some downs. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced personally in your career, and how did you overcome them?
Sure. Dealing with a wide range of people with different skill sets. Throughout my career, I've dealt with people at all levels, and have had to adjust how we communicated based on their area of concentration. I may go to a board meeting for a company that we're doing a job for at 7:30 a.m. Then by 9 o'clock, we're out on the job site and we're dealing with the subcontractors trying to send an elevation. And then by 3 o'clock, we're dealing with a maintenance individual that, his job is to clean up the site after the day's work.
Right.
And, I think the art is to make sure that whoever you're dealing with, whether it's a CEO, a subcontractor, the head of maintenance, they have to be the most important person to you at that point in time. We all possess a different level of skill sets.
Yeah.
No one is any better than anyone else. We just, I've often referred to it as we're a large train.
Right.
So some of us are the engine, some of us are the caboose, and then there's cars all in between. No one is more important. The train can't go down the tracks with anything else.
Right.
So it takes everybody to get that job done.
Synergy, collaboration.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's been a big personal belief of mine. We're only as good as the sum of all of us.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
Yeah. As we kind of wind down here on the podcast, just a couple more questions for you, with one being, what are your thoughts on the current state of entrepreneurship? And, with that, what's your advice for young people who are looking to start their own business?
Sure. I believe the recent pandemic has increased the number of people wanting to become their own boss. When we were forced to divest ourselves from the workplace as we knew it, and we had to rely on ourselves more than ever to complete the necessary tasks of our jobs.
Yeah.
We picked up our computers, we took them home. All of a sudden, now we don't have some administrative assistant. Hey, can you print this for me, or can you bind this for me for a presentation? We were pretty much forced to be a one-stop shop.
Right.
And, we found out how we have meetings still. We're not going to just, pick up, go in the car, go meet somebody face-to-face. You learn how to communicate in a different manner.
Yeah.
This forced people there again to realize they have other skill sets. They can do other things, which has now opened their eyes and opened doors. But owning your own business is much different than working for somebody. When you own something of your own, number one, it's with you 24/7.
Yeah.
You don't punch the clock and you don't leave at 5, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's just a difference.
Right.
You will become, let's say that you were the CFO of a place.
Yeah.
Well, now you're going to be the HR department. You're going to be that CFO. You're going to handle customer and employee disputes.
Right.
You're going to handle customer problems. You're going to handle logistics and materials handling issues. You're going to wear every single hat of every single day, and you can't sit there and micromanage, but you have to be involved enough that things are going forward.
Right.
So it's just that you're taking something that you had, let's say, a narrow track with your mind, and now it's broadened. So you have to be cognizant of everything that's going on around you.
Right.
So.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was going to say it's one of those things that you have to be willing to expand and learn, and I would assume fail.
Yes.
Right? You're going to mess it up.
That's the main thing. People ask from time to time, well, how did you get to be good at doing this or good at doing that? And I just look at them, I said, because you're exactly right. You have to be willing to fail, because if you don't fail, you really don't know if you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And then you can't then retrain yourself to do something in a different manner.
Right.
So I believe failing is probably the best teacher that any of us could ever have.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I appreciate the advice. That's great. Part of the podcast I want to hit on is, the wisdom that you've had through years of business, and there's a lot people can learn from you, so we appreciate that. All right, last question for you.
Yep.
This is one I asked for all the alums on the podcast. If you could go back in time and speak at your graduation, knowing what you know now, what would you say to your class of 1982 there?
Just continue to have an open mind, prepare, embrace, and welcome change.
Love it. John, thank you for the time. Appreciate you coming on the podcast and everything you've done for the school and continue to do for us going forward.
Thank you much.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right.